What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch, and today we're going to be breaking down the crosshairs that were recently added to Overwatch. Fans of the channel will know that I have been desperately pleading to get gaps and crosshair settings, so I'm extremely excited that they're adding this to the game. But after toying with the crosshair settings for quite some time and playing with a variety of characters on the PTR and really experimenting with what different things could work for me and what I can envision work for different types of players, I've come up with what I think is some of the best crosshairs for all of the heroes. But of course, remember, there is no perfect answer to this. You're going to have to customize it to your own liking based upon where your strengths or weaknesses are, or purely based on what you can see better, because visibility is key when we're talking about crosshairs. It's something I'm going to bring up quite a bit. I'm going to give some reasoning for using different types of crosshairs for different types of heroes, and you may find that one that I explain is good for one set of thing you like for another. That's fine. All the crosshairs that I'm going to be showing today, I suggest putting the opacity up to 100. It might just because I have aging eyes, but above all else, I want to be able to see my crosshair clearly. Don't want any transparency. I don't want it to drift off into the background. Overwatch is a very colorful game. The worst thing that can happen is that you lose track of your crosshair, which is why, of course, for many players, a dot isn't really good enough. We have what I'm going to call the standard crosshair, high in visibility, with large, obvious lines and a sizable gap. You'll be able to line up all sorts of shots with this. For a little bit more precision, a step down in size can help focus your aim more acutely. Having a smaller crosshair might even strain your eyes a little bit. In some ways, that's a good thing because it's forcing you to stare intensely at that small object that you're looking at. And I even go one step further to a small cross with no gap. This is the crosshair that I ended up using for McCree and then deciding to use with all of my heroes, although I do find use in all of the ones that we're talking about today. The small cross with no gap works well for Overwatch because it's such a colorful game. It makes sense to me to be able to just simply put a thick cross onto the meat of where I'm trying to aim, whether that be the head or the center of mass. And it's got the benefits of the dot where it's simple and focuses your attention very carefully into the center of your screen, but also still has lines, unlike the dot, that help you line up the targets you're going to be looking at. Okay, so that's the very general gist of some good useful crosshairs that you can look into and ones that we're going to reference and then break down in more depth. But first, let's start explaining the philosophy of why certain crosshairs work and what they're even for. I know it might look big and gaudy, but I do really like this crosshair for Soldier. Why is that, would you ask? Well, the lines are long so that I can easily track targets. We'll talk about that in a second, but the center gap helps out with both types of shots, both accurate and inaccurate when fully shooting. But the lines on a crosshair are meant to physically line up shots, so you can keep it parallel with a horizontal head glitch or whatever parts of geometry that you're trying to look around. Like if you're trying to shoot around a car to try to hit a target behind it, the lines of the crosshair can help line this up so that you can physically see the dimensions of what you're looking at. Now, the bigger the crosshair is, the better that spatial reasoning will be for you, because it'll be able to let you kind of measure the crosshair length and distance of what you're trying to line up on screen. But also, the bigger your crosshairs are, the more visibility you lack on the screen because they take up more space. But this is all going to depend on the hero and the mechanics that they have and what's going to be important for your aim. With Soldier, of course, his first few shots are incredibly accurate, but after that, he has quite a big spread, and a crosshair that's this big helps me do a variety of the types of shots that Soldier 76 does, which of course the most important thing is general tracking. Oftentimes you're going to be full auto spraying and just need to keep the center of mass at the target, but it also allows me to carefully pinpoint headshots with the big space in the center of the crosshair to be able to pick off targets at range as well. Because of the style of Soldier 76 weapon, I find that this crosshair works good on all those different levels. Helps you track, gives you the visibility to still hit skill shots on your ranged bursts, and also shows you kind of a indication of where your spread's going to be by having a rather large gap in the center of the screen. Now, conversely, for McCree, we're going to talk about something completely different. At first, I thought I wanted a gap on this character, but what I found was using a small crosshair with quite a sizable gap made it really hard to see on the screen, actually. At least for me. You might find this to be a little bit different for yourself, but it's very important for McCree to be able to line up a pixel shot, because each shot that he shoots is one tiny pixel, and you need to be able to hit that directly on a head. It's not like Soldier, where you can spray a bunch of shots or just generally track towards them as they're running around. You're gonna need to hit very accurate shots, oftentimes in the head. So what I developed for my McCree is this stubby little cross. Now I like that quite a bit. Onto a spread weapon, let's talk about Roadhog. The big circle, and on mine I made it a little bit thicker for visibility reasons, can look like it's pretty helpful, and in some ways it is. When you have a circle with the show accuracy setting on, it will show you generally where your spread is going to be going, and the big obvious circle can somewhat help you line up hooks. But Roadhog's a bit deceiving, actually, because really he is a very skillful hero, and there's two really important types of Roadhog shots that I think the circle isn't going to do you justice for. One, obviously lining up a hook, you need to have more or less perfect tracking through the animation of letting the hook go, and if your crosshair is a bit unwieldy, you may actually lose sight of keeping the target you want to hook at the center of mass. Simplify this for yourself. Use a normal crosshair, I think, can help you line up hooks more accurately. Any of the crosshairs I've already mentioned or a big dot will help you with this. The hook one probably is obvious, but what might not be so obvious, of course, is his magical right click. I say magic because there's this incredible magic distance that you can be away from somebody and land a one-shot kill. And what that requires is actually McCree-like precision, where you aim perfectly onto the head of the opponent and also be at that perfect distance where the cone of your spread of your alt fire is going out. And if you can get that entire spread into an enemy's head, it can do massive damage and potentially even one-shot kill them. It's difficult to do, but it's such an important part of Roadhog's kit that I don't think you're going to want to make that shot more difficult for yourself by having this big spread accurate weapon. You don't want to be thinking about your spread, actually. You want to be thinking about the skill shot center of the screen. And this goes for all spread weapons, but Roadhog too, that if you know where the spread goes, as in Roadhog's primary fire, it's this big, fat, massive spread, then compensate for that with your crosshair, no matter what size it is. You don't necessarily need a crosshair to tell you where that spread's going to go if you're familiar with the character. And that's an important thing about all crosshairs, of course, is that knowing the character and how their weapon performs is more important than having a crosshair that you expect to be able to tell you how to aim for you. No. You gotta learn the character first and then use the crosshair to set up the shot that you want to go for. And I don't think his spread weapon shots are very difficult to hit. Aim at the center of mass in order to hit the majority of it. The difficult shots, of course, are making sure that you get guaranteed hook value or setting up for those insane right clicks. Now, a circle for spread won't be as strict for the other spread weapons. Doomfist, Reaper, Diva, all you probably could get away with using the circle. But knowing how to aim the spread means that you don't necessarily need that big circle to show you where this entire spread's gonna go. Instead, you should know that you're aiming a spread weapon and use a smaller crosshair that shows you where the center is, rather than where the extent of the spread is. I would just do this more traditional fat style crosshair with a gap in it, the style that I thought that I would like to use for every character before I started experimenting. Because this type of crosshair, it works well for just about every character that aren't the ones that I'm mentioning explicitly. Really basic, very visible. With a combination of a gap as well as clear lines, it's kind of the best of all worlds, I find. But of course, it lacks the precision of the stubby one I made for McCree and the long lines that I think help with tracking on Soldier. And speaking of long lines, I have a goofy one that you might be shocked to see works, but I'll tell you why. On Widowmaker, it might not feel like you do a lot of tracking, but you actually do. As you're setting up for a big lethal Widow shot, you spend quite a lot of time tracking the target before you pull the trigger. And to accurately take out these heads at long range, I found that having the long lines helped you track, because it really helps your spatial reasoning as you're lining up these shots. Because as you're going to set up this headshot, I have a purposefully small gap in the crosshair, because you want to try to line up the crosshair so that once that head pops into that small gap, you pull the trigger. It's pretty unpractical for her assault rifle, but I think it works pretty well to set up the long range shots. But of course, if that gaudy, massive crosshair is too distracting for you, which is very important that it isn't, then go ahead and go down to a more accurate, precise one. Hitting headshots is the key, so it kind of depends on where your weaknesses as a player's lie. If you're struggling to try to line up a long, careful shot, the longer lines might help you, but if you feel like you got that down and you don't need that aid, then shrink that crosshair down so that it's more the size of a head so that you can more accurately try to just place it onto your opponent. The Overwatch characters in this game move insanely fast. Hitting headshots is not easy, of course, and the mechanics of doing so are more important than your crosshair. I think the long line crosshair that I developed will probably help you if you are newer to FPS games and you're trying to just carefully line up a shot that doesn't have insane movement. But the higher up you go in the ranks, you're probably going to want to have a more precise one, because the characters you're going to be aiming at are going to be flying across the screen in haphazard ways, and you're going to need the pinpoint accuracy to just hit a pixel as it's moving. For Hanzo and other accurate projectiles, what I call the standard crosshair works well because it gives you a clear indication of the head you're going to be aiming at, but also has a little bit of room to work with in the gap so that at range you can aim up a little bit to be able to compensate for the drop off. And it also has the lines, of course, to be able to track the target that you're looking at. Ana's a bit of a weird one because she has both a projectile and a hit scan. So I ended up liking the precise stubby crosshair the most with this one, because a lot of times you are going to be putting the dot right on them. When you're leading the projectile, it kind of doesn't matter what your crosshair is because it moves at a moderate speed anyway. You're not looking to have some incredibly precise placement on it because you have to compensate for travel time anyway. You're not going to be aiming at the target a lot of the time. So I'm going to say this one has a lot of personal preference. Now for most other characters, I'm going to say my standard cross with a gap is going to do well for you, but we will go on for some more specific reasoning for trying and experimenting with some other things. For instance, characters that have slow-moving projectiles like Pharah or Junkrat, really your crosshair isn't the biggest asset to you anyway. You're not really using it most of the time to line up a shot. You're going to be leading it so far in advance that whatever you like to look at while doing that is probably going to be fine. Whether that's a dot, a crosshair, something goofy in the middle of the screen, whatever you like, whatever's fun. But a couple characters that I found a little bit more tricky might surprise you. Zarya and Bastion, I actually decided to go with longer crosshairs with a bit more of a forgiving gap in the middle than I do with Soldier, with the reason being that because you shoot so much, because your ammo capacity is so high with Zarya and Bastion, there's tons of hit detection marks that are going to keep popping up on screen and kind of obscure my vision. But I still want the lines of the crosshair to be able to help me with my tracking on the target. However, I don't need it as precise as some of the other characters because Zarya's beam is quite forgiving. You want to hit it at the center of mass anyway. Bastion can't even headshot anymore. You're going to want to be shooting the center of mass, and with the crosshair that I have here, I'm able to spray and pray towards the center of the target and easily see what I'm shooting at while having the large crosshair to line everything up. Characters that are a little bit more tricky for me to give solid advice for, like Genji and Mei, their projectiles are so specific that I think it's going to depend on the style of aiming that you do most often as a player, or the one that you think you need more help with. The problem is both of their projectiles are quite small, actually, in terms of the types of hitboxes that they have, whereas a character like Pharah's rockets are massive in tree trunk size. Genji and Mei need to be quite accurate, so I found that using my McCree crosshair worked well for them, but you could just as easily find yourself using any type of crosshair. Really sick pro players can use a dot, for instance. And since Mei's Icicle, though fast moving, is on a bit of a delay, you're oftentimes going to have to quickly flick to the target that you're shooting at, because unlike Hanzo, where you can ready your projectile ahead of time, then release it when you're ready, Mei has to be flicking quickly, because as she clicks the button, of course, there's a delay before when it comes out. But either way, that just means that you're going to have to be quite accurate and precise with it. So I'm not going to advise too big of a gap, but a gap could work for you, but I prefer on both of these characters my precision small crosshair. There's a whole bunch of heroes that you might think I haven't mentioned, but really, whatever your favorite standard crosshair is will probably work well for them. Orisa, Diva, Winston, Mercy, Reinhardt, Symmetra, Sombra, Zenyatta, Torb, anything else I haven't mentioned. Your results may vary with all of these characters depending on your strengths or weaknesses. I mainly would just advise the standard crosshair, but perhaps you like one of the other ones that I mentioned. For those, I don't think their play style leans one way or another, that one crosshair would significantly help you more than another. Whatever you prefer probably works fine for those. Well, that's it for today's video about crosshairs. I hope you found the information useful, and if you did, please leave a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description, you can check out our Discord server where you can interact with our community and find teammates to pair up with. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.